take to film this one? I mean,
well, they all took the same amount of time. They all took 6 weeks to film, which is amazingly quick, and they did all the takes in one take. Occasionally, if something went terribly wrong, it was take two. And they went, take two! When you're doing comedy, it's probably brilliant because you get the most immediate comedic reaction. And when you repeat double takes and things, they're never quite as sharp. So it's better if you can do it in take one, really. But so because Jungle was the very first one I did, it has a sort of special place in my heart because it was, they were paying me very little money for Carrying Up the Jungle, and I lived in a bed sit in Belsize Park. And I had to be at the studio in Highwood so early that the trains weren't running then, And I remember saying to Peter Rogers, well, can I have a car? And he nearly had a stroke. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, he said, you can have a car and no money, or you can have a money and no car. Well, I was 22 and really, struggling financially and to even pay the rent. So I said, I'll take the money. And I kept expecting to be fired all the time as well. I kept thinking they'd made a terrible mistake because I'd done 4 years in rep. And then I went to meet Peter Rogers and I went in to read for the part of Jungle Girl, and I actually said in the interview, and nobody, when they say at home, don't practice this at home, don't ever do what I do because it's crazy. I went in and I said to him, don't give me the part of the lead because I've only done one small film part. With Roger Moore I think I did 2 lines. I've done all theatre, so don't give me June, find a small part. Don't it's too much of a risk for you. And then he laughed and they took the chance and gave me June. So I was very nervous for the first few days. I really thought I was going to be fired because Jerry Rogers, the director, took me on one side and said, Jackie, I've got something rather difficult to tell you. And I thought, he's going to fire me. He's seen the first rushes and he's realised they've made a terrible mistake. And I said, oh, what is it? And he said, well, this afternoon we've got to throw a bucket of water in your face. And I was so relieved. I said, oh, that's wonderful. We're doing the love scene with Terry and we're wearing our leopard skin outfits, and he had his little loincloth and I had my bikini, my leopard skin bikini, and we're doing this rather tender love scene and we're doing it for real because that's the best way to do comedies. We're doing it and we notice everybody shaking with laughter. We take no notice. We think, this isn't supposed to be funny, this is supposed to be very touching and nice. So we continue it. So you'll see this when you see the film. We're doing it, trying to do it very sort of sincerely. And apparently he'd slipped out of his loincloth and was there for everything to see. And everyone was looking at it and laughing. And the director leaned over to our makeup lady, who was called Nora, who was extremely sweet but rather innocent. Nora was. And he said to Nora, Nora, you didn't make it up. There was some hysterical things happened off, away from the camera. You can imagine with people like Charles Hawtrey and Kenny Williams. I was the new girl on the block, so I used to sit there and Kenny Williams would just tell me all these funny stories, and Jerry Thomas would come up and say, will you please come, we've got to do this, we're waiting to film, and Kenneth Williams would say, oh no, I'm just telling her a story, in a minute. And you're waiting to film. If you could hear, what went on or see what went on, it was actually often funnier than the script. It was more outrageous, more uncontained and wild. Maddie.
Jackie, how did you get on with Frankie? How did you get on with Frankie Howard?
Brilliantly. He was lovely to me. He used to tell me that he was a bit of a depressive person. And he used to say that, I think he lived with his sister, and he said his sister always used to laugh in a sort of rather ironic way when the press used to ask her and say to her, it must be an absolute hoot living with your brother. She used to go, yes, it's very funny. But he was a dear man. I liked him very much. I met my husband when I was about 16, Douglas, who's over there, and he used to come on the set to meet me, and Kenneth Williams was far more interested in Douglas. When you bring that nice boyfriend of yours? We we were doing, I think it was Karen at Your Convenience, where we went on
Yeah, it was.
location to Brighton, and we were on at the fairground, and I was supposed to have a scene with Bernard, and he'd gone in to the ghost train with Maggie Nolan, and we were waiting for them to come out to do this scene, and they never came out, and they never came out, and they never came out. So in the end, somebody went into the ghost train to find them, and they said, because Maggie's quite tall as well, and they said they'd both leaned over at the same time, and the whole thing had derailed, and they were on the floor in the middle of where the ghost train was, because it was all black.
Yes.
And they had to be led out with torches. And everyone was saying, well, that's your story. That was Maggie Nolan, and as you know, is very gorgeous and sexy. And they came out looking rather dishevelled. So, yes, and they said they'd come in, that the whole thing had fallen over.
Did you work with Roger Moore?
Oh, yes.
Also, what did you do?
That was the first film I ever did, and it was a thing called The Man Who Haunted Himself, when I played his secretary, and I think I had a very small part in that. And I remember going to the film to do the filming, and they brought him a tray of stuff for tea, and they said, "Oh, here's your tea, Mr. Moore." And of course they brought nothing for me, because I was just a little small part actress. And he said, "Miss Piper must have some tea." And they insisted that I had some tea as well, which I thought was incredibly nice. And then we roll on, and I'm then at Pinewood, doing the carry-ons, and we're all sitting around this table, screaming and shouting and throwing buns, and the rest of the Pinewood tables were very sort of elegant and well-behaved. Anyway, Roger Moore's sitting over there doing a Bond, I suppose, with somebody very glamorous, no one's. And we're on this table. And he came up to the table where I was. I was surrounded by everybody famous, except for me. And he said, "Good afternoon, Miss Piper." And everyone went, and I went bright red, I was probably covered in donut that somebody had thrown across the table. And I thought, how amazing, A, that he bothered to come, B, that he remembered who I was. I'd only done 2 lines with him. That was him. He was a complete and utter gentleman. Leonard Ruster was fantastic. He's the most professional, devoted person I've ever known. Because when it came to lunchtime, the rest of us would all go to the pub and have a sandwich and half a lager or something. And Leonard would still be working on the script and with the director and with the author, and he never seemed to stop for lunch or coffee. He was always working on the script. He was absolutely, I've never known anyone work so hard. Ray is now alive and well at 81, and he rang me last year at aged 80 and said, "I'm doing a film of Run for Your Wife." And I used to play one of the wives, obviously. And he said, "You can't play one of the wives, darling, you're too old." He said, "That's being played by Denise Van Outen, but will you be my nurse?" And I said, "Yes, of course I will." And we all did it, 100 of us did it, who'd all been in Run for Your Wife.
That's because the cast list is staggering.
There's 100 people who do cameos, and we all did it for a bunch of flowers and a bottle of champagne, and all our fee went to the Home for the Old Actors. All our fee went to charity. In fact, if you watch it, every small part is played by somebody that you'll know. Maureen Littman. Judi Dench plays a bag lady. Maureen Littman's in
I'm looking
June
forward to the
Whitfield.
DVD.
I mean, if you watch
So that's if nothing else.
you can hardly, you have to watch it twice, because you can't hardly watch. I mean, Robin Asquith's driving a bus. I mean, the people in my scene when I was a nurse, Bernie Cribbins was on crutches for real, because he'd had a knee operation, but he wasn't. And Ross Abbott was lying in bed moaning, and Nicky Henson had a cough, but his cough nearly stole the scene because he went on cough. And every single person you would know. So it's worth buying it just to see.
Yeah,
You'd need to see it, you could have a quiz, a Christmas quiz. How many people could you spot? Where was Judi Dench? She was the bag lady. You could have a quiz.
Yeah. Did you get to keep the leopard skin bikini?
Sadly, no.
No, I haven't got it, so I don't know whatever happened to that. No, I don't know whatever happened to that. It's strange, because there wasn't any interest in memorabilia then. They just went in the bin.
So, thank you very much, Jacki.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you all so much.